Thank you all so much. And I'm here on behalf of my co-chair or vice chair, Jacqueline Wagner, as well as several other commissioners of the LAHSA Commission who are present today virtually, and thank them for their leadership and commitment. I also want to thank Supervisor Holly Mitchell and Mayor Garcetti for their engagement, involvement, and passion in dealing with the issue of homelessness. And lastly, as well as our two co-executive directors who have stepped in, Molly Reisman and Christina Dixon, who have been an effective leaders for us in this time, as well as all of the volunteers and also individuals out there who work every single day helping to address the issue of homelessness. We know, as you will see in this count, that it is not one person who solves the problem. It is not one solution that solves the problem, but it is coordination, it is good policy, it is working together for common cause that we can address the issue of homelessness on the streets of Los Angeles. There are lots of good things in the numbers today and some opportunities that we will see, and developing policy to ensure that we are helping get everyone housed in Los Angeles. So it's my pleasure to be able to introduce our two co-executive directors, Molly Reisman and Christina Dixon, for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gruhl, Chair Gruhl to be exact. Good morning and welcome to the 2022 Greater Los Angeles Homeless Count announcement. As Commissioner Gruhl noted, my name is Christina Dixon and I serve as an acting co-executive director and chief financial and administration officer here at LAHSA. It is my pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you today, along with my colleague Molly Reisman, about the results of the 2022 Homeless Count. Next slide. The homeless count is required by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. As the lead agency in the Los Angeles Continuum of Care, LAHSA is responsible for coordinating the point in time count for most of Los Angeles County. The LA Continuum of Care includes all of LA County except for Glendale, Long Beach, and Pasadena. These jurisdictions conduct separate counts and add their totals to the LA Continuum for the final county-wide number. This is a regional tool that is best utilized as a snapshot of the issue in Los Angeles County at a point in time, which helps us inform comprehensive policy and direct resources in response to the most emergent crisis of our time. It is important to lift up that the people behind the numbers we are sharing with you this afternoon are our neighbors, coworkers, employees, friends, and loved ones, a sentiment that we cannot lose sight of throughout this process. Next slide, please. In LA County, we have one of the most robust people-powered rehousing systems in the nation. And the people who make this system work are building a Los Angeles where everyone has a place to call home. In the last 5 years, these dedicated public servants coordinated an end to homelessness for over 84,000 Angelenos. Day in and day out, they are connecting our neighbors to care, recovery, homes, and they are saving lives. Today, we begin with a few stories of individuals who experienced homelessness and have found a place to call home. We will begin with Pamela, who fell into homelessness while battling a disability and addiction. She was uplifted and made her way to housing through community support and a willingness to help others. She now works as a vocational case manager, helping others stay housed and become self-sustained. Then there's Juliana, who was a runaway emancipated youth that escaped trauma. Today, she connects landlords and property managers in East Hollywood and the San Gabriel Valley with formerly unhoused residents who are rebuilding their lives through the supportive services that she and her team provide. Pamela and Juliana are a few of the people driving our rehousing system. Their stories are examples of the successes that are happening every day across LA County. We thank them for sharing their experiences and look forward to continuing the work that will bring more tales of success in the days to come. To do that, our system needs to overcome the results of decades of poor policy decisions that drive this humanitarian crisis. The new strategic direction that LAHSA recently rolled out is helping to make progress every day to help more individuals get connected to housing options. As the LA area begins to expand its housing supply, the rehousing system, which is made up of LAHSA, the county, city, and community partners, help Angelenos whom the system has failed by rebuilding trust and giving everyone hope with every connection to a safe place to call home, an effort that has been deeply affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. What cannot be denied is that the pandemic has had a profound effect on homelessness. Investments from our government partners made the rehousing system work better. In the early days of the pandemic, the federal, state, and local governments came together under the shared goal of placing as many of our COVID vulnerable unhoused neighbors into hotel rooms as a part of Project Room Key. As a shelter program that offered each individual their own room, Project Room Key provided shelter to over 10,500 people, of which over 40% were placed into permanent housing. There is no mistake that the unprecedented shared vision and political will put forth during the pandemic shows what we can do together to address this crisis. At the same time, the pandemic presented unique challenges that needed to be overcome as we served our unhoused neighbors. Overall, the 2022 count sheds light on what is working while also highlighting the problems that persist despite our coordinated efforts. As we dive into the numbers, we will lift up what is working and also highlight the challenges that remain. In the second half of the presentation, my colleague Molly will walk you through how we overcome these challenges with some of the efforts currently underway to address homelessness across LA County. Next slide, please. This year, we estimate that 69,144 people are experiencing homelessness on any given night in LA County, a 4.1% increase from 2020. As a reminder, LAHSA did not conduct a homeless count in 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In the city of Los Angeles, we estimate that 41,980 people experience homelessness on any given night, a 2% increase from 2020. We know the numbers may surprise you. In a few minutes, we will dive deeper into what the data is telling us about this increase. Since we did not conduct a homeless count in 2021, we believe that it is prudent to make a comparison of the increase in individuals experiencing homelessness between the results of the counts conducted between 2020 through 2022 and the results of the counts conducted between 2018 through 2020. For context, in the 2 years before 2020, the 2020 count, LA County saw a 25.9% rise and the city of LA's count rose 32% in the number of people experiencing homelessness. Before we move on, we want to take a moment to reiterate that the homeless count is a number taken at a particular point in time, traditionally in January. This year, the count was conducted in late February. While it is too soon to know what this year's count results will mean long-term, the numbers are suggesting that there's a flattening of the curve, meaning the percent increase of people experiencing homelessness is shrinking over time. What the results can also reflect is the effects the winter Omicron surge had on the ability to conduct homeless count, whereby it made it harder to count youth and families. These two populations combine to make up approximately 10% of the total homeless count. Next slide. We will now take a look at how homelessness is spread across the region. Generally speaking, we did not see a lot of movement across spas in this year's count. There are obvious exceptions whereby in SPA 5, we saw a 23% decrease in people experiencing homelessness, while SPA 6 and 8, we saw increases. Next slide. Last year, LAHSA and our community partners made 21,213 permanent housing placements. We have made over 84,000 placements in the past 5 years, which is enough to fill Dodger Stadium 1.5 times. However, the growth in homeless count tells us people are still falling into homelessness faster than our system can move them out, due in large part to the fact that housing remains unaffordable for many Angelenos. Next slide. Across LA County, more people are in shelter than ever before, which is something to be celebrated. Shelter is a necessary and vital part of our system because bringing people inside protects them from the destructive effects on their health and safety that comes from experiencing unsheltered homelessness. LA County's shelter population increased by 12% to 20,596 individuals, or about 30% of the people experiencing homelessness on any given night. LA has dramatically increased its investments in shelter beds. However, our numbers do not reflect full utilization. Due to the Omicron surge during the homeless count, the need for social distancing forced us to decompress or reduce the number of beds available in our shelter system. This resulted in the loss of a significant percentage of beds, whereby many shelters had to hold beds offline or beds were left empty with sites being closed due to quarantine, thus making the point-in-time count more challenging. Next slide. The city of Los Angeles also saw an 8.7% increase in sheltered individuals, indicating a rise to 13,522 people in shelter. The city of LA also saw a 1.4% drop in the number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. The expansion in shelter was made possible by the substantial increase in shelter options over the past several years, led by the city of LA and other cities across the county. Our community's collective investments in shelter, including programs like A Bridge Home, Tiny Homes, Project Home Key, and Project Room Key, led to an overall 62% increase in shelter beds from 2019 through 2022. My apologies. However, our shelter system was still experiencing decompression back in February to ensure social distancing, which limited the number of people our system could bring inside. With that being said, there's more hard work ahead, as thousands of our neighbors still live on the streets, and our community must do more to ensure people living in shelter find a permanent home. Next slide. We know the numbers we have talked about so far may surprise you, and that it feels like the increase in homelessness should be larger than ever. The numbers from this year's homeless count are telling us that there was a 17% increase in tents, vehicles, and makeshift shelters on our streets and sidewalks from 2020. However, at the same time, LA County's unsheltered population rose by 1%. For context, what we are seeing is a significant increase in the evidence of homelessness while not seeing a corresponding increase in our unsheltered neighbors. You may be wondering, so how do we explain that? Well, during the early days of the pandemic, our communities followed CDC guidance to prevent the spread of the virus by pausing encampment cleanups. This allowed our unsheltered neighbors to shelter in place while living outside. Without the cleanups, the number of tents, vehicles, and makeshift shelters increased by 17%. Meanwhile, our shelter options increased, as did the efforts to move people into them. As a result, more people moved inside to shelter, and some left tents and belongings behind in encampments. As the region began to reopen in the months since the homeless count, the city of LA, county, and independent cities have increased encampment cleanups, and most are using LAHSA's best practices to do it the right way. Before we move on, we need to note that our system is in a unique situation. During the pandemic, one-time federal pandemic assistance and policies helped keep people in their homes and expanded shelter. However, many of the policies and funding sources that made an impact are now ending, leaving households unsure if they will be able to keep their homes and less resources for a rehousing system to respond. Because homelessness is a lagging indicator, it is possible that future homeless counts could show significant increases. Only time will tell what COVID-19's true effect is on our neighbors on the edge of experiencing homelessness. Next slide. The winter Omicron variant spike led to fewer family and transition age youth surveys being collected. Additionally, as it was previously noted, COVID made it harder to count youth and families this year, which make up around 10% of the count. The youth count was particularly challenging as many youth access centers were closed during the Omicron surge. This led to a lower number of surveys completed than in previous years. While we were not able to fully see the impacts of the pandemic on our most vulnerable youth and families, we appreciate that homelessness is the tip of the iceberg for far too many youth and families, and they do not have a stable place to call home in LA. Next slide. This year's count revealed that 39.5% of our unhoused neighbors report experiencing serious mental illness and substance abuse, which is lower than the national average reported by HUD. That also means that 60.5% of our unhoused neighbors do not report experiencing a serious mental illness or substance abuse disorder. COVID exacerbated mental illness and substance use among the housed and unhoused alike. However, overdoses affected the unhoused drastically more. People experiencing homelessness are 35 times more likely to overdose than someone housed, with overdoses amongst LA's unhoused increasing by 80% in 2021, driven by the rise of fentanyl use and economic dislocation. Everyone at LAHSA and our colleagues at every organization dedicated to addressing homelessness are heartbroken at the increased loss of life due to the substance abuse on our streets. Our community needs more resources dedicated to substance use disorders and mental health treatment to ensure that our most vulnerable neighbors have the opportunity to secure stable housing and thrive in our communities. Next slide. Over the last 2 years, LAHSA and our partners were able to bring inside to shelter over 4,000 people battling addiction and mental illness. With the launch of Project Room Key, there was a commitment to bring as many of our vulnerable neighbors inside as possible, and that is exactly what happened. With Project Room Key and Project Home Key being a model of shelter with a private room, it proved to be very successful at getting our most vulnerable neighbors inside. We cannot understate that the positive impact that the coordinated efforts of our federal, state, and local partners had on the system that we take from this year's homeless count. We are also grateful for the critical life-saving work of our county partners to address this tragedy. They are shifting tactics to focus on our rehousing system on those with the most serious and complex behavioral health issues who have been on the streets for at least 6 months. We need to build on the success of Project Home Key and Project Room Key and redouble our efforts to bring indoors our most vulnerable neighbors by decreasing any barriers to accessing shelter. Next slide. Now we will take a look at the demographic data. As a part of the homeless count, we gather data via demographic survey. Please note that the numbers reflected on the slide is only for the LACOC because Glendale, Long Beach, and Pasadena conduct their own homeless count. And it is not possible for us to include their numbers in our demographic and subpopulation data. There is some good news to report as it relates to veterans experiencing homelessness, where we saw a decrease of 6.1% from 2020. This success is getting more veterans housed is a testament to the outstanding work of our colleagues at the VA. The number of women experiencing homelessness increased by 2.4%, while seniors experiencing homelessness grew by 6.5%. And people experiencing chronic homelessness grew by 10.2%. For more information about these subpopulations, visit the Homeless Count press release page on our website. As we turn our attention to race and ethnicity, we find that Black people remain overrepresented among our unhoused neighbors. Black people make up 30% of the unhoused, but are only 9% of the county population. There is no doubt that past racist government policies and housing discrimination continue to have an impact on who and how many people experience homelessness in our county. To help right past wrongs, LAHSA is centering racial equity in all of our work, which is the only way we can overcome the prejudicial policies of the past. We at LAHSA encourage all of our partners to take the steps necessary to ensure our policies and programs do everything they can to help fix this massive imbalance. When we take a closer look at the overall racial demographics, we are seeing that 25.8% more people experiencing homelessness identify as Latino. Latinos are the largest demographic group in our region, representing 49% of LA County, and now 44% of people experiencing homelessness. LAHSA is committed to bringing our expertise in addressing racial equity forward to have an increased focus on Latino homelessness in the coming year. We are working closely with the Office of Immigrant Affairs on how to address undocumented homelessness, and we'll be launching a work group focused on Latino homelessness. This concludes our snapshot into what homelessness looks like in LA County on any given night. I will now turn the presentation over to my colleague, Molly Reisman, who will walk you through the solutions that LAHSA and our partners at the city and county are working on to overcome those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Good morning. If there's one thing you take away from these results, we want you to see how policy and investments matter. Tenant protections like eviction moratoriums and rental assistance implemented by the county and city of LA helped people stay in their homes and not fall into homelessness during the pandemic. The county and cities across the region are expanding rent stabilization and tenant protections to ensure people can continue to pay their rents and stay in their homes. Angelenos taxed themselves to invest in helping our unhoused neighbors. That led to unprecedented investments in shelter, housing, and services through Proposition Triple H and Measure H. This means that more people experiencing homelessness have safe places to sleep, are getting connected to help, and are exiting homelessness. However, we're at a precarious moment. Many of the policies and investments that prevented COVID from driving more households into homelessness have or will end soon. We need to learn from these policies and investments and make them ongoing, such as making investments in rental assistance and emergency financial assistance ongoing. Homelessness in LA is a crisis decades in the making. Our collective movement is making progress every day, and we can in fact see it. So let's take a closer look. Next slide. Thank you. The city of LA approved more affordable housing in the past 5 years than in the previous 30 years. Proposition Triple H will exceed its goal of creating 10,000 new affordable and supportive homes. I want to pause and say thank you to the voters of LA for this tremendous investment in bringing our unhoused neighbors home. In addition to building affordable housing, our region is innovating with strategies like Project Home Key, where we buy existing buildings to provide supportive housing. We're also learning how to support people experiencing homelessness and sharing apartments as a strategy to get off the streets. Finally, a number of homeless service providers are experimenting with master leasing. We are taking an all hands on deck approach to using every strategy possible to help people exit homelessness in this incredibly tight rental market. Led by the city of LA and other cities across the county, our LACOC shelter capacity has increased 62% since 2019. We went from roughly 15,000 beds available on any given night in 2019 to over 25,000 in 2022. Shelter is not a long-term solution, but bringing our neighbors inside saves lives and it places them on a path out of homelessness. We've talked a little bit about how this crisis is the result of bad, often racially discriminatory policies. I want to give some examples here from our national and local history. Things like housing discrimination, policies that withheld wealth, land, and home ownership from people of color, mass incarceration, and inadequate support for people as they leave prison or jails, hospitals, foster care, or even the military. Over the years, downzoning and restricting growth slowed down LA's housing supply. As a result, housing prices skyrocketed and income stagnated. And the result was that it deprived thousands of people of access to affordable homes. Next slide, thank you. People and policies created this crisis, and people and policies can end it. So as we consider what this year's homeless count data tells us, let's take the opportunity to make the changes we need to successfully address homelessness in LA County. Focusing on the root causes of homelessness will show us how we can end this crisis. This is how we bring all of our unhoused neighbors home. LAHSA and our community partners are making big strategic policy changes right now. Our goal, to give you the short version, is to reduce unsheltered homelessness by moving people from shelter to housing faster. The pandemic allowed us to innovate with models like Project Room Key and Project Home Key. We're now applying those innovations and lessons learned to our entire rehousing system. Individual cities in LA County can help us achieve our goals by coordinating more effectively. We have a huge opportunity to use our current resources to help even more people. Together, we can achieve our goal of reducing unsheltered homelessness over the next 3 years. And there are examples we can look to. Houston reduced homelessness by defining shared strategic goals across government entities and focusing on creating affordable housing. Strategic goals start with established metrics. We have a partnership with LA County, the city, and California Policy Lab to develop a set of shared metrics to track our progress. This is a critical step towards increasing coordination and accountability. And stay tuned because we'll be releasing those metrics at the end of September. Earlier, we reported that from 2019 to 2022, the LA region's shelter capacity increased by 62%, but resources for permanent housing programs did not keep pace. While the growth of our shelter system is a tremendous achievement, we need to ensure that investments in supportive housing and permanent housing programs keep pace so everyone who goes into shelter has a pathway out of homelessness. During last year's housing inventory count, we shared that to quickly and efficiently move our unhoused neighbors into housing, we need to have a 5-to-1 permanent housing to shelter ratio. Our system today is closer to a 1-to-1 ratio. We need to continue to expand affordable and permanent housing strategies like emergency housing vouchers, affordable housing trust funds, Project Home Key, master leasing, shared housing, landlords partnering with the Lease Up program, as well as specialty housing for those who are most vulnerable, like seniors and those with serious mental illness. We move people into housing only when there's housing available. So adding more affordable housing is our best move as a region to address homelessness. That's not all that's improving in our system. LA County's homeless initiative is making changes to rehouse our neighbors faster and expand homelessness prevention. We often say that the homeless services system is the safety net of last resort, that if you're here, you've already been failed by another safety net or multiple safety nets. So how do we strengthen those safety nets? By maximizing the capacity of healthcare and social services. For example, we can use data to predict and prevent homelessness. We can keep people in their homes by helping those who are at risk of falling into homelessness to pay their rent. And we can improve support for people exiting foster care, jails, county hospitals, and prevent them from ever becoming homeless. The biggest factor driving homelessness is that housing is unaffordable for just about everyone. To fix this, we need to increase our housing supply across the county by adding more than 800,000 units over the next 8 years, and we need a particular focus on affordable housing. Policymakers at every level need to make significant policy changes if we're going to step up the pace of production. Cities have unique powers to site property. There's a lot that can be done to streamline the process of building and converting housing and to maximize all possible funding sources. Having more housing means that when an encampment is cleared, cities can partner to help get people into shelters and support people to move from shelters into a home of their own, such as supportive housing or Project Home Key. We've provided a lot of information today about homelessness in the county during the point in time count. So let's pull back so we can leave you with some takeaways. First, homelessness is rising slower than it did in previous years. Second, there are more tents, cars, etc., that indicate visible homelessness on the streets, but there are actually fewer people occupying each of these. Third, crucial policy and investments prevented COVID from making homelessness much, much worse during the pandemic. Fourth, our rehousing system houses enough people to end homelessness in LA County in 3 to 4 years, but the number of people falling into homelessness outpaces our ability to house them. Fifth, investment in mental health and substance use disorder treatment services and beds is badly needed. Sixth, we've significantly increased the number of people in shelter, which saves lives and helps them exit homelessness. Seventh, Black people are still overrepresented among people experiencing homelessness, but we did see a decrease in 2022. The number of Latinos experiencing homelessness has grown considerably over the last 2 years. And finally, with the economic support from state and federal government programs to address the effects of COVID-19 coming to an end, our residents and our rehousing system are at a very precarious moment. As the pandemic era economic programs end, too many households are on the verge of homelessness. At the same time, our rehousing system will have less resources to respond to these households as one-time investments in rehousing end as well. That said, this year's homeless count gives us hope that collaboration, good policy decisions, and investments can make this crisis better. We'll only solve this together. So here's how you can help. You can advocate to support policies to create housing. You can say yes to housing in every community, and you can get involved with the United Way's Everyone In campaign. If you want to volunteer, there are many ways. LAHSA's Get Involved page can connect you with local service providers. Many neighborhoods have self-organized groups like Neighbors for Neighbors LA, Hollywood Forward, SELA, K-Town for All, or LA Can. You can vote for candidates and propositions that address the root causes of homelessness. If you are a property owner, you can help expand the housing supply and create rental housing available to people experiencing homelessness, such as partnering with the Lease Up program or with your local service provider. If you're an employer, you can hire formerly homeless applicants. And of course, we would love for everyone to volunteer for the 2023 homeless count in January. People experiencing homelessness are our loved ones. They're our neighbors, our parents, our siblings, our children, and our employees. We all see rents rising. We have to work together to create a safety net and a strong community that's there for people who lose their homes. LAHSA is grateful for the tens of thousands of frontline staff and volunteers who work tirelessly every day to create strong community and bring our unhoused neighbors home. Learn more about some of their stories at our new website, Rehousing LA. I know we have some of them in the room you'll get to meet later as well. And with that, that concludes the homeless count presentation.